We have until 12 o'clock, and then they're going to kick us out of this room, so we're going to be expeditious with regard to our opening comments, and so we can get into the questions as quickly as possible. The panel is quite impressive. Johan Marcoux, PhD, Temple University. The doctor is the vice chair of the American for Safe Access Multidisciplinary Scientific Advisory Board and is currently investigating the pharmacological effects of cannabis receptors at Temple University. He effectively translates complex scientific concepts to a lay audience and is developing internal networks by key cannabis researchers. Since 2003, he has been invited to speak on the subject of cannabinoids science at university, medical cannabis cooperatives, libraries, and high schools. Dr. Marcoux is also court-qualified cannabis and synthetic, thank you very much, expert. Councilman Jim Kenney, Philadelphia City Council. Councilman Kenney is a lifelong Philadelphian. You're not supposed to applaud yet. Thank you very much. A graduate of LaSalle University, Jim was first elected to Philadelphia City Council in 1991 and is currently serving his 6th term in office as a Democratic councilman at large, focusing his efforts on making Philadelphia a safer, more inclusive, and vibrant city. He recently introduced legislation to decriminalize possession of small amount of marijuana, 30 grams or 1 ounce. Instead of a mandatory arrest, police would issue a citation for $25 fine. Police would be able to stay on the street dealing with real public safety issues, and offenders would be able to pay their fine and not be saddled with a criminal record. Rochelle Yon, Marijuana Policy Project. Ms. Yon is a legislative analyst for the Marijuana Policy Project. She works with activists and legislators to pass medical marijuana decriminalization and tax regulate laws in nearly 20 different states and territories. In 2012, she played a key role in protesting the crackdown against 420 activities by CU Boulder administration. Rochelle went on to work as a legal intern for Sensible Colorado, a nonprofit organization that was crucial in the passing Colorado's historic Amendment 64, legalizing marijuana for adult use, and then at Vicent Sindenberg, the state's foremost marijuana law firm. Rochelle received her JD from the University of Colorado Law School. Kirsten Hine, Assistant District Attorney of Philadelphia. Ms. Hine is an ADA and the Chief of District Attorney's Office Charging Unit. She's a graduate of St. Joe's University and the City of New York Law School. She worked as a prosecutor in the Family Court Division of the New York City Law Department prior to being hired by the Philadelphia District Attorney in 2006. As the Chief of the Charging Unit, Ms. Hine worked with the First Judicial District and other criminal justice stakeholders to develop and implement several diversion programs, including the Small Amount Marijuana Program. The SAM program, as it's known, was implemented shortly after by D.A. Williams after he took office in 2010. So let's give a round of applause to our panel. You have 3.5 minutes for your opening comments so that we can get to questions. Councilman.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator, for the invitation. I really do appreciate it. It's a very interesting debate, and I'm glad that I got here early in order to hear everyone's opinion about the legalization issue as it relates to prohibition, prohibition of alcohol and other things. It's a very interesting debate, and there's lots of merit on both sides of the issue. I, as a city councilman member, do not have the ability to legalize marijuana. It's done either on a state level or a federal level. So my lane, basically, and my concern is the method and the numbers of arrests relative to possession of small amounts of marijuana, dime bag, under 30 grams. And the people from NORML had come to me, the National Organization for Marijuana Laws, had come to me earlier to take a look at trying to get, because D.A. Williams put SAM in place, there was really no sense in arresting people that were never going to be prosecuted in the first place. And as a result of my investigation and looking into the numbers, I was astounded at the disparity of arrests in the city relative to possession of small amounts of marijuana. There were 4,200 arrests last year in Philadelphia for small amount of possession. 84% were African Americans, mostly male African Americans between the ages of 18 and 30. That creates a situation where a person is put in handcuffs, is taken to a police station, is photographed, fingerprinted, booked, and if you're arrested on a Friday, you're not out till Monday. It's a ridiculous waste of personnel hours, 17,000 police hours a year off the street processing people of small possession. two officers are needed to do it. And of those 17,000 hours, it represents 2,100 8-hour shifts. The police could be on the street fighting crime. The worst part, however, in my opinion, is the fact that all those young people are now saddled with an arrest record that makes it impossible for them to get a job. Impossible. When I was a young person in South Philadelphia, in a predominantly white neighborhood, Irish Catholic neighborhood that was more prone, to beer than marijuana, when an officer would either catch you drinking underage or with possession of marijuana underage, he or she would dump it in the storm drain or dump it down the sewer, what we call it the sewer in South Philly, and tell you to get on your way. Stop and frisk is the cause of all this, because the only people being stopped and frisked do not look like me or my children. And I think, and Bishop testified at our hearing, he said, lock everybody up or lock no one up. And my big goal here is on Thursday to finally pass this piece of legislation that will allow the police department to implement a citation policy where a young person is stopped. And I would love to get rid of stop and frisk, period, because I think it's a really obnoxious policy and way of policing. But if someone's stopped and they're possessing it, it's confiscated, they're issued a citation, and they pay a fine. And they don't get an arrest record, so we're able to put them to work. And without them being able to get to work, the cycle of poverty and despair in our communities will never end. And that's my hope on Thursday. So thank you for being here.
Dr. McCoo.
I had some visual aids. So, hi, my name is Jay Harpu. I received my PhD from Temple University for studying cannabis and the active ingredients found in cannabis called cannabinoids. I'd like to start off with a short history and science lesson and then move into quality control of cannabis.
Doc, let me cut you off.
Sorry.
3.5 minutes. If you can do it in 3.5 minutes, great. But we're going to have to keep moving through.
That's fine.
Right.
So, short science lesson, driving and marijuana. So driving studies as far as medical cannabis is concerned, people have uncontrollable muscle spasms, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and any neurodegenerative disorder drive better in controlled studies after inhaling cannabis. This has been proven. Our most long-term drug abuse studies done in this country with people who have a minimum use of cannabis, of using cannabis 5,000 times and are as young as 30, any effects on the brain of cannabis are undetectable after 30 days of use using our most sensitive technology for brain scans. Quality control issues of cannabis. This is what we're going to have to worry about when cannabis becomes legal here, whether recreational or medicinally. And the issue of quality control goes back to ancient times. Ancient Assyrians left a legacy of 10,000 clay tablets, among which contained very specific instructions for preparing cannabis for religious and other purposes. The ancient Egyptians, our oldest medical text in existence, contains specific instructions for preparing cannabis as a medicine. Also, the Bible, the Old Testament, or as I grew up knowing it, the Torah, Exodus 30:23, contains a recipe for preparing cannabis in a form of a holy anointing oil. It contains cinnamon, myrrh, and 250 shekels of cannabis, which is roughly 6 pounds of cannabis. We can argue later if that's enough for personal use. All right, so here we have the cannabis monograph was published this year. I'm an author of this historical document. What is a cannabis monograph? It's a guidelines for how regulators can effectively regulate botanical medicines. Who uses monographs? FDA. FDA uses American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monographs. The USDA. The USDA uses American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monographs. Who else uses it? The European Union. The FDA, the USDA, European Union have all written papers citing American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monographs. This is a guideline to help you determine safety matrices, dosing guidelines, how to grow it, how to identify it in the field. And I'd like to draw your attention to the picture here on the right. This is the government's grow at the University of Mississippi, where they ship approximately 300 pre-rolled cannabis cigarettes to the surviving patients of the 1960s IND program every month. That is 1 pound of pre-rolled prepared cannabis guaranteed of a certain percentage every month. And you'll notice that there is a 15-foot tall barbed wire fence, a guard tower, and 24-hour surveillance, so none of the marijuana plants escape. So like I said, FDA, USDA, European Union all use monographs, has identity tests, purity metrics, and analytical methods. The application of these guidelines is a patient-focused certification program I've tried around the country for the last 6 months, certifying dispensaries, cultivation centers, manufacturing centers, and laboratories that analyze cannabis. We go through and audit them. So I'm out there implementing actual laws that legislators pass in these business operations. Yeah, I think that's about covers it. I'd like to draw your attention to these resources. At this website, you can get the recommendations for regulators on how to best business practices for cannabis laboratories, cultivation sites, and dispensaries, as well as manufacturers. You can find the monograph at this site, herbal.ahp.net. Safe Access Now has all the information about the voluntary certification program that is becoming mandatory in Nevada and Washington. So they're using the monograph, this document I have here, if you'd like to see it, to actually regulate cannabis in states. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rochelle.
Good morning. My name is Rochelle. Like Bishop Robinson before me, I don't think that revenue and money is the most compelling argument for legalizing marijuana. However, the good Senator Williams has invited me to speak on that topic specifically, so that's what I'll be focusing my testimony on. And the evidence is absolutely overwhelming that this boost to the economy and job creation has been an absolute blessing to the communities in Colorado. So I don't think it's an argument to be overlooked either. Now, recreational sales in Colorado began on January 1st this year. However, marijuana has been legal for adults 21 and up since November 2012, when the voters decided to legalize marijuana by citizen initiative. Since between 2012 and 2013, in Colorado, the number of marijuana-related cases filed in state courts has plummeted 77%. The number of petty marijuana possession charges fell 81%. Now, in Pennsylvania, police departments and law enforcement agencies estimate they spend $100 million on marijuana cases alone. So if you consider the ratio of crimes to Colorado, that's an 81% savings on $100 million. However, the most dramatic economic effects of Amendment 64, the legalization law, did not appear until January 1st of this year, when legal sales began in the state of Colorado. On the first day alone, the first one day, $1 million in revenue to the marijuana industry. By the end of the week, $5 million in revenue. And every one of those dollars was taxed by the state and brought more dollars into state coffers for state programs. By the end of April, when we have the most recent estimates, there was $10,896,143 from recreational sales of marijuana alone. This does not include the existing medical marijuana program already in the state. In addition to tax revenue, the regulated marijuana industry is also boosting the local economy by creating jobs, both directly in the industry and in indirect collateral sectors. The Marijuana Enforcement Division, which is under the state's Department of Revenue, has issued over 10,000 occupational licenses, which are required for handling marijuana directly. So these are people who would be retail assistants working in dispensaries, as well as those working in cultivation centers, growing the plants, trimming, harvesting, and curing the plants. That's 10,000 jobs created just by the marijuana industry. I do have a lot of data, so Senator, if I run out of time, I know you've been shy about cutting people off.
Yeah,
but
you're getting close to your...
Okay.
Don't
More than
remember, the brownie's still here.
More than half of these jobs created in retail processing and cultivation are entry level, so they tend to pay at or above living wage salary in Colorado. These are jobs that require little to no education, and so they're easily accessible to communities that have been traditionally disenfranchised or left behind by the war on drugs. According to Betty Aldworth, who's a former deputy director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, as cultivation facilities continue to grow, their employee base becomes more traditionally agricultural. In a tour that she took recently of one of the largest cultivation facilities in the entire world, the majority of the workers she met with were Latino and mostly women, you know.
Yeah, 20 seconds.
Okay, one last point, and I have a ton more, so somebody asked me questions about this. The UFCW, one of the largest unions in the United States, already has a marijuana division. It represents employees in 6 states and the District of Columbia, working, again, in dispensaries, coffee shops, bakeries, patient identification centers, hydroponic stores, and growing and training facilities.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Hine.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? I can't tell if the microphone's on or not. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this conversation. Obviously, I'm here on behalf of the district attorney. So this is kind of interesting for me because I feel like for the last 4 years, I've been answering questions about why the DA's office is trying to decriminalize marijuana, only to explain that that's not really what we were trying to do with the SAM program. What we were trying to do was to be smart on crime and to use resources on the part of the police department and the court system in a more intelligent way. I think that there's a larger conversation going on about how we spend our tax dollars, how we spend our resources on a day-to-day basis, and whether we need to have as many people in jail as we have. And I think that generally there's an agreement that we have too many people in jail and that there are different ways that we could be dealing with the issues that we come into contact with in the courtroom that might have a long-term impact on recidivism and public safety. So the SAM program was really born out of the idea that the current statute, the marijuana statute, really doesn't treat possession of a small amount of marijuana the way that it treats other misdemeanor offenses. It's an ungraded misdemeanor, but it's punishable by only 30 days incarceration. So one of the first things I would tell people when they asked us if we were decriminalizing marijuana was to say, you know, that's not really what we're doing. The state legislature is doing that because they've said that the penalty for possession of a small amount of marijuana is very different than the penalty for other misdemeanor offenses, which could carry up to 5 years in jail if it's a misdemeanor of the first degree. And so we basically, when the DA took office, we started looking at what things we could do differently that would improve our use of resources. And marijuana cases was the first thing that came up. DAs were asked, what are they spending the most time on in court? And what do they think is something that could be eliminated that would make their jobs more productive and more focused on public safety? And the response was resounding that prosecuting small amount of marijuana cases was not a good use of time and money, wasn't necessarily a good use to be testing marijuana on every case, which is an expense. It wasn't necessarily a good use to be subpoenaing police officers to come to court to testify when we recognized that most judges were probably going to tell the person that they would receive a penalty of no further penalty, meaning they would have not, even if they were convicted, they wouldn't have to be on probation or do anything else. And in a lot of cases, the judges were not convicting people, and they were actually telling them, you know, come back in 30 days or 60 days, and if nothing has happened, then the case will be dismissed. And so that's really how the SAM program came into existence. Just talking about, you know, what benefits there might be to arresting people for marijuana possession. I think from the law enforcement point of view,
You have about 20 more seconds.
we see it as a crime-fighting tool. I compare it to turnstile jumping in New York. I mean, the benefit for the police department is they're going to come into contact with a lot of people. They're going to identify a lot of people, and they're going to find people that we're looking for that we might not otherwise come into contact with. We have to decide if we think that is a basis to continue to stop people and arrest them for marijuana. But that's definitely something that happens. Because people are stopped and arrested for marijuana and fingerprinted in photographs. We figure out that they're wanted on other things, and we're able to take them off the streets. My last tidbit is last year, 3,200 arrests were referred to the SAM program. So those are 3,200 cases that didn't go through traditional prosecution, or I should say people that were offered to not go through traditional prosecution, take a class, pay a fine, the case gets dismissed and automatically expunged without any further action on the part of the defendant. Of the 3,200 people that were referred, 1,500 to 1,600 people successfully completed that program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to change the order of how we do this. We have about 30 minutes to get these questions in, so I'm excited we can have an activity with time. So we're going to start with your questions first, and then I'll interject my questions as we go along. But before I actually take the cards, why don't I allow that the two elected officials who are here with us, if you have a question, you're more than free to have that opportunity. That means that you don't have one prepared at this point. The judge is looking to the legislator, and the always shy representative is also looking the other way. So we'll move past that moment. In the event that marijuana is legalized in Pennsylvania, it will create enormous economic opportunity. How do we ensure that minorities, and I'm not big on the word minorities because in Philadelphia, people of color are not the minorities, but that aside, how do we ensure minorities are included, given the fact that many were excluded from the realizing of the economic benefits of the gaming bill?
Well, like I already said, many of these positions created directly in the industry are entry-level positions that don't require any specialized education. What we've actually seen in Maryland, and I believe Maryland is both as a close-by example and one of the more recent places where we've passed medical marijuana, they actually have a provision that prioritizes businesses that can qualify as minority enterprises to get licenses for those dispensaries. So that's absolutely something we can explore if there's a similar status for businesses in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Pardon me?
Okay, we can't apologize.
That hasn't been established yet.
Excuse me, with all due respect. If you want to ask a question, I'm going to respect everybody else who followed the process. Just give me a card. I'll be happy to get the question for you, okay? No problem. Otherwise, we'll go back and forth. The next question, is it realistic to think that marijuana can be legalized for medical use only and not for recreational use?
It already has been in many states. I mean, and it's also, there's an extract of cannabis called Sativex. It's available in like 60 countries, including Mexico and Canada. It's right now in phase 3 trials where it's been for over 10 years in this country, waiting for a change at the FDA and the DEA.
What studies have been done to detail how decriminalization versus legalization impacts cost, incarceration rates, and racial disparity? Anybody? These are all for anybody who wants to answer.
In our research relative to the legislation that's pending, it's estimated about $4 million a year in police costs would be eliminated, and $3 million a year in court costs would be eliminated. That money could easily be sent to the school district for educational purposes to teach people not to or understand the ramifications of drug use, or other things like maybe art, music, and sports. But you know, we're spending money. We're spending money on things that we really don't need to spend them on. And one of the things about the arrest and the ADA mentioned it about using this arrest method as a way to find criminals or criminal activity. Most major modern police departments in the country have technology in their cars that enable them to determine whether or not a person has a warrant, anything outstanding that would cause for their arrest. In an effort to take a young person in to determine whether or not they're involved in some other activity and then give them the record at the same time, to me is unconscionable. Last year in the 5th Police District in Philadelphia, which encompasses mostly Manayunk, Main Street, everybody's been up there. It's a big college area. It's a young person's kind of area. There was one arrest for possession of marijuana last year, a very unlucky black man. Who one arrest. I honestly believe the
Mr.
use
Forsythe, I'm glad you're very safe.
the use of
it wasn't one of the 6.
the use of that method to determine other crimes, I think, is terrible, and I think it further separates minority communities or majority communities, as Senator Williams said, in Philadelphia, from the police department. It makes them less likely. When I was a kid growing up, my parents would say to me, if you ever have a problem, you find a police officer. That is not common knowledge. That's not common instruction in other communities in our city. And I want that activity, that interaction should change the dynamic and make the city safer in the long run. So.
If legalized, how much counseling, I guess, would be mandatory? What will be done to address the underlying problems?
Yeah. Well, in Colorado, I believe there is a specific portion of the marijuana revenues that have been bookmarked for addiction and abuse counseling or education treatment that is necessary. But it's important to note also that not all marijuana users are addicts who have a problem, just like most alcohol users are not alcoholics. Most people can consume cannabis or marijuana without any addictive problems. In fact, only about at most 9% of people who use marijuana then go on to become dependent. This is as compared to about 15% of alcohol users and 32% of tobacco users. So there really isn't a strong addictive property to marijuana.
And the physiology of that is also the reason people get busted for drug tests 30 to 40 to, I think the record is 70-something days after using marijuana one time, is because it's stored in your fat and time released. And so you can have a small amount of marijuana in your system that's not affecting your physiology, but just sort of the metabolite is floating around there. And that's thought also to play a reason why people don't have dependence and withdrawal symptoms, is because the body treats it like fat and stores it and time releases the metabolites.
Great. How do you justify tobacco being still legal when we know it's harmful, even to others secondhand smoke, and marijuana being legal? I'm not sure that's necessary to anybody up, well, I guess the district attorney's office, I don't know.
Well,
The police department would be most appropriate. But
I
go
mean,
ahead.
I think I would go back to what the bishop said. I mean, I think that the question from that point of view is this legalization going to make the situation better or not? And just because something that we all recognize is harmful is legal, does that mean that it logically follows that we should legalize marijuana? I mean, you can have that debate about, I mean, many things, including alcohol, which has a lot of negative side effects.
I'm not necessarily advocating the legalization, but I will tell you that tobacco's bad for you. Alcohol's bad for you. We license it, we sell it, and we advertise it, not tobacco on television, but you watch the Super Bowl, you can't see anything but alcohol ads. It's about money. And the people who argue that it should be legalized are on sound ground when they say it may be bad for you, but so is these other things, and we legalize them and license them and sell them and tax them. So I'm not making a legalization argument. I'm just saying there seems to be a bit of a dichotomy there when it comes to those other substances.
I will make the legalization argument. As far as a comparison to tobacco, we have successfully reduced the rate of youth consumption of tobacco dramatically since 1994. I believe one statistic I saw was a 2/3 reduction of tobacco use amongst 10th graders, 2/3. And that's without ever arresting anyone for the mere possession of tobacco. That was through education and regulation, which is how we should be treating our young people, not by throwing them in jail.
But also through taxation. There have been I'm chuckling about it, but there's been a significant increase in the cost of buying a pack of cigarettes in America. I think that has a little bit to do with people, and by the way,
I hope it gets higher.
yeah, we do hope. And I know. I'm working on it every day, James. Every day. I would also suggest to you this, that while the rates of smoking cigarettes have gone down, there's an increase potentially in other areas where, in other words, cost is a factor in terms of what they would buy. So the question is, have the consumption, and I don't know the answer to this, the consumption within that same population decreased in other vices, or smoking marijuana, doing other types of drugs, or finding alcohol? Have we found a decrease within that generation using any type of substance? I think would be a very great teller to us.
Well, just another piece of data. I have so many in my head.
You do. And you
Center-
travel a long way, so you can tell them all.
Okay, well, the Center for Disease Control just released its most recent youth report this last week, and they found that marijuana use rates are steady. They have not gone up since the 22 states have legalized medical marijuana, or the 2 states have legalized marijuana, or just because, some opponents claim just the fact that we're talking about opening up these rules is letting young people think that it's okay to use and there's an increase. That's not what the statistics show. The CDC is not a proponent of legalization either, and they're just showing us the facts, and youth use rates have not gone up.
Thank you.